And I just want to introduce this wonderful woman, very dear to my heart. She's a Venezuelan author of easy-to-read Spanish literature for beginning language learners. I'll put a link to her books in the chat in a moment. She's a specialist in second language reading instruction with a focus on struggling readers and comprehension support. You see a lot of that support in her readers. She's very in tune with what those beginner readers need. She's an experienced Spanish and French teacher using comprehension-based methods, particularly story listening. And she's a writer of narratives that explore identity, resilience, cultural heritage, and social challenges. Again, I'll put a link to all of her books. They're wonderful books, beautiful, just amazing books. And I'm so excited to have you here today, Margarita. So I'll stop sharing, and then you can share your screen.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being in this session. We know I see some friendly faces there. Mariem, Keith, Steve. Thank you for being here. Monique down there. So it's 8:59 in Australia. I know that I have 35 minutes, right? Is it correct? 35 minutes?
Correct.
And 10 minutes questions? That's
yes.
it. English is my third language. And so sometimes I struggle to get my thoughts under control and get it flowing with the very good flow. So sometimes I take more time to say the things, and that might stress me a little bit, but I'll do my best. I'm going to share my screen. I have divided my presentation in 3 bits. And Erin, I will be so happy if you can monitor me, because the first bit cannot exceed 10 minutes and the second cannot exceed 10 minutes. So I have 15 minutes for the end. So
I will be watching the clock.
You will be watching the clock. So give me a sec and I share my screen. Perfect. Okay, behind, don't despair. Here I am. Okay, while I present, I'm not going to be able to see the chat, right? So my name is Margarita Pérez García, and I'm going to talk to you today about free voluntary reading. So how do we encourage our learners to continue reading, to read as much as they can, to read whatever they want to read without making it a chore, giving them all the possible freedom, but still keeping them accountable. That's the idea. So today we are going to talk about 3 things. What is extensive reading and why it works? 5 tips to set up a successful sustained silent reading program, SSR, and 5 practical ways to keep students motivated and accountable while they read. So what is extensive reading? Extensive reading is an approach for language learning. It's an approach that can be used on its own, or it can be used as a complement to whatever type of teaching you do, in which students are encouraged to read large amounts of books that they can understand. Ideally, this is input -1 and not input +1. Books should be then easier than what they can read, so that the students can read without a dictionary and can read faster. Extensive reading uses graded readers or literature with controlled vocabulary, so that the students are exposed to the vocabulary and the grammar that they are able to read without problem. And students are free to choose whatever book they want to read, because they are not reading to learn a particular set of vocabulary. They are reading just for the pleasure of reading, for the pleasure of understanding what the story is about. Complete comprehension is not the goal. There is a little bit of noise. Someone is not muted. Sorry. Comprehension is not, total comprehension is not the goal. The goal is to expose the students to as much input as they can so that they gradually acquire the language. Now, people talk about extensive reading a lot, but I want to tell you that I speak 5 languages and I have acquired my 3rd language only through reading. I speak English today because I read. I didn't have English classes. I didn't go to an English school. I just read books. And perhaps in a year, I read 150 books. I am very avid reader and I acquired English through reading. So I'm the living proof. My English not perfect, but I read a lot. And so in a nutshell, reading should be extensive. In an extensive reading program, students should read quickly, enjoyably, being able to understand why they read so they don't need a dictionary, right? And so extensive reading is at the top of the axis between comprehension and reading speed. So when the comprehension is low and the students when their reading speed is slow and they don't understand a lot, reading is really hard, is a chore. Well, extensive reading is the contrary to that. Students understand a lot and therefore they are able to read fast. And if they read fast, they can then process the words in groups instead of word by word and focus on the ideas of the book. And therefore, if they can focus on the ideas, they are concentrated on comprehension and understanding what is happening. And therefore, then they read more, they retain more, they stay engaged, and they enjoy reading. So we need to create the conditions for extensive reading. I'm just going to mention this very, very quickly. We know, well, the forgetting curve is something well known, but the underlying idea is that the more the days go by, the more students are going to forget. And so if we teach a language item today, in 7 days, it's going to be forgotten. And extensive reading is the solution for this. Although perhaps you don't have the time to do this cyclical reviewing of the language items in your classroom. Some teachers have to move from one unit to the other. But if your students are reading, then they get the repeated exposure to the words. They see the words in a context and a meaningful context. When they are reading, they are not stressed. There is an inherent self-paced repetition as they read. And the thing I like the most about setting an extensive reading program is that because the students choose their book that they can read at their level according to their interest, extensive reading is differentiated and individualized per se. So the Extensive Reading Foundation says that the students need to encounter a word multiple times, ideally 20, for it to become part of the active vocabulary. Some researchers say that the students need to meet the word 18 times to be able to remember it 3 months later. And so repeated exposure, both intentional and incidental, will help reinforce the meaning. And through extensive reading, you will get to those 20. famous 20 repetitions encounter with a word. And if you are not familiar with the Extensive Reading Foundation Reading a Mountain Library Calculator, go ahead, Google it after this short presentation. But in short, this scale tells you for a given level, how many words they should be reading in a year. For a beginning level, students should be reading 52,000 words in a year. This means that the average number of words per book they should be reading is books around 3,000 words, and they should be reading 16 books in a year. Similarly, for an intermediate mid, they should be reading around 240,000 words in a year. And books should be fairly long books, 13,000 words, and they should be reading 17 books in a year. So my question for you as we take the first 10 minutes is, how much extensive reading your students are doing every day? I can tell you, my students are doing, for every single class I meet my students are doing a minimum of 10 minutes a class. Therefore, if I meet my students 6 times a week, they are doing 1 hour. 1 hour a week of reading is what is happening in my classroom for all my classes. Therefore, my intermediate students are reading 240,000 words a year. And that's what my students read. And it's such a compliment. In many classrooms, they say, oh, teacher-centered. Extensive reading is student-centered. Extensive reading, students are doing the work. You are just reading with them. So let's move quickly to 5 tips to set a successful sustained reading program. And there are many advices around setting an an SSR program, sustained silent reading program. Well, the first is that you need to have enough books. But if you go to the Extensive Reading Foundation scale, at the bottom of this scale, it will tell you how many books per how many students. But you need to have enough books. Without enough books, so buy books, in other words. You need to have enough books that are graded with a controlled vocabulary, offering a variety of genders and themes, so that your students have a choice. Then, once you set up your library, and for me, I think this is the most important advice, your students need to understand why they are reading. I am surprised at the number of people who put a book in the hands of a student and say, oh no, you read now because read. And actually, students need to understand how the language learning is going to be transformed through reading. They need to understand how many words they are going to be acquiring, how faster their reading speed is going to develop, how more confident, how many words they will acquire. They need to be aware of all those benefits, but they need to be aware of these things. They need to know that reading easier material is better than reading harder material. And when you have high achievers do not accept this. High achievers think that they have to read hard to learn. And so it's very difficult. They all want to read Harry Potter. They need to understand that they don't need to feel guilty if they choose something easy to read, that reading a lot is better than reading just one text, that the more they read, the better they will get at reading. And I always speak to them about exams, because in the countries where I have taught, in the UK, in New Zealand, and in Australia, there are exit exams. And they are stressed about the exams, but the exams show three pitiful 300-word texts. When the students read 240,000 words in a year, when they see a 300-word text, they laugh. It's so easy. So when they get to the exams, if they read a lot, they are not going to be stressed. I encourage my students to set a goal for how much they read. And I always say to them that if they don't enjoy a book, they can stop reading. So I ask my students, when we start the silent reading period, to choose 2 or 3 books that they have in hand. And if they don't like it, then they can change the book. Make a place for extensive reading in your program and stick to it. It is sacred. There is nothing, my students know, they come into the room, they get their book, they start reading. Nothing will ever interfere with reading. And that's why I ask my students to get 2, 3 books when they are reading a book for the first time. Very, very important. Students need to understand how a graded reader works and how to use the library. Don't put a graded reader in the hands of your students without saying, hey, this is like this is the glossary. What are you going to do when you encounter a difficult word? Are you going to jump over the word and continue reading? Are you going to use the glossary? Are you going to guess the meaning of the word? They need to know. They don't know what a graded reader is. Ideally, well, my reading library is divided by levels, but I take time to introduce the reading library to them. I was going to show, wait a sec. Okay. Well, I'll show it later. And my 5th tip is don't do it alone. There is fantastic advice on extensive reading for language teachers. For only $24, you can buy High Impact Reading Strategies by Bryce Hedstrom. This is an amazing book. It's like a 300 pages book. It is an electronic book, and it has everything you need to know to set up a reading program. The two conversation classroom by Mike Peter, who is going to be presenting later today for $29.99. This is one of the best book I bought last year. This is an amazing book that has a section on extensive reading, but Mike's advice on how to manage your classroom, a communicative language classroom where reading is a strong pillar, is a must read. And of course, this is for $43 US, the Bible of extensive reading activities for teaching language by Julian Bamford and Richard Day. This book is just amazing. It's always sitting by my desk. So the best thing you need to understand, or I can leave you with today, is this. There is a quote from Ruben Alves, and is that extensive reading needs to be a program with little, low, or no accountability, or a light accountability, because there is a total incompatibility between the joy of reading, a vagabond experience, and the experience of reading in order to answer questions and explain what you understood. In the last 7 weeks, I have read 15 books, on top of the 2 Japanese books that I have read for when I am doing extensive reading with my students. And I am so thankful that nobody asked me to fill a book report. So I am going to share with you five strategies to do just that, to encourage your students to read a lot, but without the pressure of a book report. So when I hear the word book report, I go running away. So the first, and I have been doing this every year since 2018, it's a reading marathon. A reading marathon is a competition where students aim to read a certain number of words within a designated period of time. So some teachers do a reading marathon on a weekend, on a month, on a term. But I have found that for a language class, doing a reading marathon throughout the year is a very good experience, because then I can encourage my students to read a longer distance. Students can register, well, I registered them, it's mandatory, can register and complete any distance, 5K, 10K, 15, 21, 42 kilometers. So what you need to do is to agree on the value of the kilometer. Many teachers who do extensive reading programs and set up a reading marathon, they go through the process of counting on sourcing the number of words of a book. And they say, okay, this is a 3,000 words book, therefore it's 3 kilometers. This is a 5,000 book, therefore is 5 kilometers. But actually, if you remember the Extensive Reading Foundation scale, students should be reading independently of the level, the reading speed. Students should be reading per year 25, 29, around 20 books. 17, 16, 17, 18, 20. Is it around 20 books a year? So after suffering during my first reading marathon, trying to find the length of each book and putting the number of kilometers, I stopped that nonsense. And I said, one book equals 1 kilometer. That's it. So best case scenario, my students read, no, worst case scenario, my students read 10 books, 15 books. I am still very close to what the Extensive Reading Foundation requires. But best case scenario, my students will be completing a half a marathon. An amazing scenario, my students will be reading 42 books a year, and there isn't a year where I have students who do not read 42 books. So what do you have to do? You have to give each student a marathon course. So it's a route or route, whatever I don't know how you pronounce it. And you print it. But when I looked at the reading marathon course in the extensive reading book, I thought, oh, this is really lackluster. This doesn't inspire me. And where are they going to put the books? This looks very sad. So I went on to create a physical display in my classroom where, those, I don't even know the word in English, neither in Spanish, but I do know it in French. It's the pochette transparente, those plastic things where you put the books. I cut them in half and I put every single book on the wall, and I created a course on the board, and I gave students a runner with their photo. And so they would run it like that. And I did this for a long time. But this year I changed. This year I did something better that I love to share with you. A digital course. So I thought, can I create a digital marathon course that is not just in my classroom, that all the students can see? They can go there, they can put the books they read, they can put the reviews, and I can follow them. So now I'm just going to stop presenting, and I'm going to share with you. Well, I made a copy for you to take a copy if you want.
Invite.
So this is the idea. Students know this is an infinite whiteboard on Canva, right? And I gave students an empty template. It's a marathon. They have all the stars they can give to the books. I gave them a character, a runner. They can change the color. They have to put the names. And I created a course with 5K, 10K, 15, 21, 42 books. And these are my English students. So I teach English to Chinese students. And look at this. Look at the ownership of how they owned the runner. Look at this. So this is Anna, who is going to get out of this program. This is Iris. This is Laura. This is Fiona. This is Danica. This is Sophia Chen. This is Vicky. This is Angel. So they create the runner. They drag and drop. Before, I have to make copies, do stickers of the things. Why do I get the cover? They go find the cover on the internet. They put it into the frames. They give a rating, and then they write their review. And at the end, I ask them to put something that is emotive, something that is evocative of their reading experience. We started the program. This is the 7th week. Look at this. Where is Anna? Look. I can make comments. Anna, I'm so proud of you. You have a great motivation and commitment with your reading. Thank you, Mrs. PG. I continue to read more books. And she has done exactly that. She hit her first 10, and she read a lot of books that are not graded readers, but this is another, I wanted to show another there. Well, I am going, because time is pressing, I am going to share this with you. Of course, you don't need, you just make a copy of this, right? I'm going to put it into the chat. Everyone with the link, I copy the link and edit. What I'm going to ask you is to go into Canva and then you make a copy for you. Okay, I'm just going, don't destroy it. You will have editing access. And so it's beautiful, because then all my students can see. Okay, excellent. Everyone is coming there and copying it. Of course, I mean, my students enjoy having the reading marathon all together like this. I thought at the beginning of the year that I was going to do one course per each, but actually I thought it's really good. Okay, I go back to the presentation. I have 7 minutes and 4 more little things to present with you. So if I present again, can you see my screen? Okay, beautiful. So I think that digital, my reading marathon board is just amazing. So pat on the back. Second idea is the wall of quotes. So students are reading, and I don't want to ask them for a report. Oh, how the character changed. Oh, that boring. What is the most important part of the book? But actually, I give them post-it or hard post-it and say, the most beautiful word you learned today, the sentence you love the most. And I have a wall and the students put those there. And when they enter into the classroom, students can see. And it's a way of sharing with each other, but with very little accountability. Okay, I fell in love with the book Speed Dating. There is an excellent article by Martina Bex about speed dating, and speed dating has been there for a long time. Many libraries and teachers do. And so I ask my students once a term to choose a book they love. So one of all the books they have read, and I display in my classroom. I set my classroom in a speed dating, and they move from table to table, talking to other students about their preferred books. And is a way, if your library is large, like I have about 150 titles, it's a good way to get to know more books. The favorite book poster. So again, once a term, these are chapter posters with smash doodles. I am going to do, that's why I don't have a photo, because I thought, I'm going to do this year. Because I have so many books, I am going to use the smash doodle technique. So you can just Google smash doodle, again, Martina Bex, for the students to create one poster per book. And so I will have a wall of posters that are like advertisements for books. And so it's a creative activity, very personal, where they are going to just to share the love of their favorite book in the term. And when we finish the reading marathon, I always do a celebration, and I always do awards for the students, those who completed at 5, 10, 15, 42 books. But I then came last year with the idea of doing the top 10 books or Students' Book Awards. And the idea is that to turn reading into a shared and engaging experience where students pick their best books and they reflect on the reading. And so after the book exploration phase, which is the whole year, while you have been reading for a year, you are being handed a book awards nomination form. And then students can nominate books in different categories. You can give them the categories: best overall, the funniest, the most romantic, the most dramatic, or mystery, adventure, cultural. But they can also make their funny categories, like the most cringe-worthy book, the most unrealistic book. I have students who come to me and say, what the heck? This book was so bad. And I say, oh, yeah. Oh, what the heck? This is not even possible. So they can make the what the heck categories. And then students can nominate up to, you decide how many books per category. They don't have to fill every category. And then they vote, and you can create your top wall of books. And your top 10 wall of books, it helps also for other years. You can have it displayed at the beginning of the year. It helps also for other classes. And so I have 3 minutes, right? So it's also a way of celebration. What is the best thing that you can do to encourage your students to read? Is to celebrate that achievement with them, to rejoice in the joy of reading lots. And I put here, I wanted to share you this. because I have 1 minute, I am going to leave you with the 10 principles of an extensive reading program. I am sure you know them. I'm just going to refresh them. So you can follow me on Instagram, Mrs. Pérez García. I am always very uncomfortable with social media and not being able to do as much and as well as everyone else, but I still post from time to time. So reading material is easy. A variety of reading material on a wide range of topics must be available. Learners choose what they want to read, so choice is important. Learners read as much as possible. I aim high. I expect that my students read at least 21 books a year. The purpose of reading is usually related to pleasure, information, and general understanding. Reading is its own reward. Reading speed is usually faster rather than slower. Reading is individual and silent. I actually have a poster in my classroom that says reading is individual and silent. Teachers orient and guide the students. This is so important, especially at the beginning, they don't know what to read. So you need to teach them. And the teacher is a role model of a reader. So what do you do when your students are reading? Well, you are reading too. You are reading too. Okay, I have 1 minute. 1 minute to tell you. This is Margarita Pérez García. You can follow me at Mrs. Pérez García. You can follow me, you can amplify my work, you can get my books. I have, I love reading for the lowest, I love writing for the lowest frequency. I have a number of books written with under 100 unique words. I have 2 books in the collection of Por si las moscas with my dear friend and Colombian author Adriana Ramirez. I have my very popular best-selling book, Arroz con Cosas, Juliana, The Beautiful Little Blue, and The Monster of the Ocean. This book is translated, is going to be out this year in German, in French, and in English. I have Arepa versus Arepa, written with 120 words for a confident beginners. El Último Árbol, written with only 60 words. What a beautiful book. And for more intermediate readers, the collection Revolucionarias, about inspiring women in Latin American history. If you like my books, there is one amazing thing that you can do for me, and is to review them publicly, because teacher to teacher advice counts a lot. And that's it for me. 30
Thank you so much,
seconds.
Margarita.